Episode number 67 of Making a Case. Has the role of a step parent changed? Hey, let's get it. Hey, what's going on, man? We back at you again with another episode of Making a Case, episode 67. I'm sorry. I was literally just thinking about something. Um and it got me I'm just tripping. Have you ever had one of those moments where you laughing at yourself because you think about something and it really just makes you laugh? And really, I was thinking about somebody, people really just be having me messed up. And I want to use a different phrase, but we're professional over here, which let's get into my intro. Uh, what up? It's your boy, Dr. Jacob Isom, educator, author, speaker, entrepreneur, content creator, consultant, father, a little bit of everything. All right. Our two channel norms: one, we take points and not people, and then two, we don't do all the cussing and derogatory stuff because we are professional over here. All right. Um, so the episode for today is, has step parenting changed? Now, this may seem like, well, for some of you, this may seem like an obvious yes, right? But some of you, you may need a little bit of convincing, and that's what I'm here for. All right. So, of course, we have our pieces of evidence ready to go, lock and loaded for you. And we're going to make the case that yes, absolutely, being a step parent definitely has changed over the years. Well, for one, you didn't used to see as many step parents as you do now today. And that's just based off the numbers. And actually, I want to show you a graph from a study that was done that will kind of show those numbers. And two, we're just way more likely to end a relationship with someone we had a kid with. We don't hold it as high esteem and high regard as we used to. Um, Not when it comes to parenting, not when it comes to marriage, not when it comes to just relationships in general, right? And part of that is due to the fact that we just have so many options, right? People are always thinking that the grass is greener on the other side. So we literally just toss away and throw away people, and it doesn't matter if we married or we had kids by them. We think that somebody is just gonna step in and do the job that somebody else was supposed to do. And this conversation, of course, has been had many, many, many different times, with many, many, many different perspectives. And so now you're just going to hear my perspective on it. But of course, my perspective come with data, facts, and the stats. Okay. Did I say facts? Facts. So yes, I do believe that step parenting has changed. I think it used to be more respected. Um, Even some 40, 50 years ago. I think also that men were more willing to be step parents because it did come with respect. It did come with a woman really valuing and appreciating what that man came in the picture and did. And also, I thought it was a more natural fit when it comes to the children respecting that man, right? Of course, whether now or back then, kids knew that that wasn't their father, right? But their love and their respect was there. So much so that a lot of times you'll hear the kids calling them mom or dad, right? I mean, even nowadays, I've heard a conversation of people saying, if you're my child, you shouldn't be calling somebody else mom or dad, which I get it, but it is an emotional response, right? What happened to the whole adages of you having a bonus mom or a bonus dad, right? Well, you still using the word mom and dad. So, but this is the reason why, and this conversation is a hot button topic nowadays, because you have men that's speaking up more about being a stepfather, right? And how it's frowned upon by a lot of men. And I will say this, I'll add my 2 cents to it, that I would, I wouldn't, it wouldn't be an ideal situation for a man to be a stepfather, right? Because there's just too many dynamics come with it. That is the reason why so many people do push marriage, and staying in that marriage, right? Um, because you want to be able to have a quote unquote natural household. Because once you start getting to other dynamics of blended families and um things of that nature, then things get a little dicey. So there is a lot of danger or repercussions to coming into a family where those kids are not yours, right? And we can talk a little bit more about that when we go through our pieces of evidence, because right now I feel like I'm getting long-winded, so we're going to get to the evidence. So without further ado, I do have 3 pieces of evidence for you. We're going to get into talking about step parenting and how it's changed over the years, and how also it looks different from being a stepmom to a stepdad. All right. Which is the reason why you don't hear a lot of talk about being a stepmom, because there's way more stepdads than there are stepmoms. And really, stepmoms play more of a backseat role, while stepdads are expected to jump right in, be a leader, protector, provider, and things of that nature. So they're 2 different situations. All right. So without further ado, let's jump right in and get to evidence number 1. All right, so let's get into our first piece of evidence. We're talking about, step parenting and how things have changed. So why not, get into a little history, shall we? All right. So I actually have a study that is from, I'm assuming they're professors from Brown University. And the title of their study was An Historical Perspective of Step Parenting in the United States, Exploring Changes in the American Family Using the Age Period Cohort Model. Okay. So um this was a study that was done, and it kind of look at step parenting. We're gonna look at some data from this study. All right. So let me read a little bit to you. Of course, I'm not gonna read all 9 pages. Studies can get very long. Shoot, my study was 120 some pages. So yeah. Um, all right, so let's start with the abstract. Demographic changes during the last 50 years have reshaped the American family. Increases in divorce, non-marital births, and cohabitation have shifted child rearing from co-residence with biological parents to a variety of family environments. So the increase of divorce, the increase of having kids out of wedlock, the increase of living with somebody that you're not married with, that you may be boyfriend or girlfriend. Excuse me, I forgot to cut my ring off. Has led to an increase in step parenting. Makes sense to me. However, changes in living with children differ for men and women. During this time, mothers were increasingly more likely to live with their biological children, while men were increasingly less likely to live with their own children and more likely to live with someone else's. Of course, that's based off what we literally just talking about. We're splitting up more so than we ever did. The rate of amount of single people. And here's the issue. A lot of us are single, but that doesn't mean that we're not having sex. And that doesn't mean that we're not bearing children. This is our dilemma, right? Um, where did I stop off at? Oh, these changes have shifted the role of parenthood, especially for men, from a biological to a social one. In order to fully understand this shift, we use an age period cohort model to investigate the incidence of social parenting in the United States since 1940. All right. So they're going from 1940, I want to say, to the early 2000s. So a 60-year period. We examine gender, age, period, and cohort differences in step parenting. These demographic changes of the last half of the 20th century have complicated the definition of step parenthood. At one time, marriage was a defining feature of step families. So even when a situation, because a lot of times, of course, um, people were married back when we say 1940s, pre 1940s, right? From like 1940 to 1970, we still seen a good marriage rate, right? And it started to really decline after the 1970s. We can get into that in another video. We probably already have, to be honest with you. But um, people, so even if they got out of one marriage, they would get remarried and got into another marriage. Even though remarriage, of course, leads to divorce at a higher rate, people were still getting married. But you don't see that nowadays. That's not the case. So people will leave a marriage and then they'll go and have they hot girl summers, and it just looks totally different. Um, let's see, where am I at? But with the rise in non-marital birth and cohabitation, men and women living in relations often include children present. In turn, this rules out marriage as a clear marker for step families. Any person living with a child of a partner that is not their own should be considered a step parent. Absolutely. If you have kids in a household and those kids are not one of those parents, whether it's a man or a woman, you're a step parent. I mean, I think that's pretty understandable. That's simple. Thinking this way, roughly 2/3 of all women and 30% of all children will spend some time in a step family. Gender also seems to play a role in step parenting. With the rise in divorce, courts were more likely to award full custody of children to women, although this is slowly changing. Very slowly, by the way, I might add. Therefore, it is residentially complicated for men to be present in the lives of their biological children, since the best and most effective parenting is done in the home. Men are excluded from fulfilling their parenting roles, and consequently, for some, fatherhood becomes a less central and stable role in their lives. All of this together creates a large pool of women with children and a large pool of men without residential children, which creates a whole nother dynamic, right? So you got men that's living outside the household of their biological children, but women most of the time having custody of their kids 80% and up of the time, right? And of course, she's still gonna want to date. She's gonna want to move on to find somebody else. And when a lot of women do, and then that man comes in the household, whether it's that house or they get a house together, step parenting, right? But we're creating a situation where a lot of men are now coming into a household and being a father figure to children that's not theirs. And then in another household, you have the same dynamic that's happening. Another man stepping into it. It's crazy to me. And I don't get why we don't understand like how this is literally impacting us societally and psychologically, right? Because kids are going to say eventually, "You're not my dad. You're not my mom." But it's really not not my mom. It's more so you're not my dad. That's what you're going to hear. Which is the reason why it's tougher for a man to step in as a stepfather. It's a totally different dynamic and a role and a responsibility that a man has in a household versus a woman. All right, let's keep reading. This produces an opportunity to men to engage in the social roles of parenting through remarriage and cohabitation rather than the biological roles associated with living with one's own children. All right. Now, what I want to do is I want to scroll down and read something else. Then I want to show you some stats real quick. Real quick, like, let's see. Investigating the prevalence of step parenting makes an important contribution to family uh, demography. Step families can occur in all forms, especially with the rise in non-marital childbearing and cohabitation. As time passes, children are more likely to experience this type of family structure before they reach the age of 18. Future studies like this may help us to understand the changing family structures in which children are raised and the importance of family and marriage for both women and men. Any future study of changes in family formation over time must be sensitive to age, period, and cohort effects. All right. So, what we have to understand is that the breaking up of biological parents and their family is causing a ripple effect, because now you're creating a situation where somebody else is coming into the fray. When that's not working, now you're ripping away kids away from another parent. Now, although he's not biological, but like now you're creating a dynamic that, do I still maintain a relationship with this person? Do I not? I didn't develop a bond, but now if we do leave, that bond is destroyed. So it's it's so many psychological effects that comes from step families, which is why we should be trying to keep families together, which is why we should understand how important that mate selection is, how important vetting is, right? We got to understand that relationships, family dynamics is what run things, is what makes family, cultures, societies. Like, we got to start taking this stuff seriously, man, and just stop, thinking with our private parts. Because at the end of the day, it's really about instant gratification, right? We got to stop being in the moment. We got to start. What was the other video I did the other day? Right. We got to think about the bigger picture. We got to start thinking about the bigger picture. Let me show you some data now. Increases in step parenting. All right. Remember, this since 1940. Look at this. 5% in 1940. It went up to 6% a decade later, which is not bad. Another 40 years later, it jumped up to 42%. And in the 2000, almost 47%. And I imagine right now in 2025 that it's definitely probably at least 54%. The divorce rate is hovering almost around 50%, right? The amount of single people is hovering at like 54%. I imagine step parenting is around that same. Like, look at where we are relationally, which is why I do the work that I do, consultant wise. We have to understand how important stuff is like this, because it's a domino effect. Let me show you a little bit more. Likelihood of being a step parent. This is based off age, period, percent marriage. Look at this. So 25 to 34. Then, of course, you get a little older, it start decreasing. But look at 1940, 1950, 92,000. Look at that. Let's keep going. Likelihood of being a stepmother. So it's not much when it comes to being a stepmother. In the last 60 years, you can see that, it's kind of not much of a difference, right? But let's look at stepfathers, though. Watch this. Look at that. Look at that. And you know what the tough part is? This is the tough part. The tough part is that a lot of men can expect, or I shouldn't say expect, a lot of men are accepting the role of a stepfather. And it's multi-variable, right? Some men are getting with women that they never could get, but now that they got kids and they a little older, now they can get those women, right? We just got to be honest, right? Typically, a man with means, he doesn't have to be a stepfather, right? He wants his own natural family. But when you look at men who don't have the proclivity, don't have the access to certain women, they're more likely to be stepfathers. But unfortunately, those women a lot of times are only allowing that access because they're in the situation that they're in, right? So it's a tough pill to swallow, but the moral of the story is, man, we got to start keeping families together, man. We got to keep families together. We have to be serious about when we do have children with each other. Like, what is that plan? And the plan should be to stay together. But if you know that you're going to be selfish and that, there's a high propensity for you to leave when things get rough, then maybe you want to reconsider having kids. I mean, because right now we're causing turmoil. I'm not saying that you can't be in a blended family situation and be successful. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is it caused a whole different set of issues than if you had a biological parent situation. That's what I'm saying. All right. So I just wanted to show you that. I thought that was interesting. Look at it historically and looking at some of the data. So let's go ahead and get into our second piece of evidence and continue to make the case of how step parenting has changed over the years. All right. All right. So let's get into our second piece of evidence for why or how step parenting has changed over the years. I have an article from the APA. For those you don't know, is the American Psychological Association, which is titled "Step Family Success Depends on Ingredients." Because I know I mentioned that the latter part of the last piece of evidence that I'm not saying that step parenting can't be successful. Clearly, the numbers suggest that a lot of people are in step parenting situations, so a lot of people are making them work. Um, it just you have to understand the dynamics that comes with it. So I think this article is kind of touching on that. So let's let's read on to see what they have to say about it. 1 in 3 Americans is part of a step family, each with its own flavor. How can psychologists help them thrive? If Tolstoy were alive today, he might have penned his famous line like this: happy families are all alike, and every step family is complex in its own way. Take one example. If a step parent is frequently battering his former spouse, research shows that his children suffer. But if he's close with his ex partner, his new spouse may feel anxious and insecure. On top of this, say expert, many children don't view their step parents as real parents for the first few years, if ever. And parents in the second marriage may treat their biological children differently from their step parent. And what I will say, all of that is true, right? Which is the reason why it is not ideal to be a step parent, definitely a stepfather, right? Because you're going to have situations where it's just going to be hard to connect with children that's not your own. And the thing about it is, like, you shouldn't be expected to treat somebody like they're your own because they're not, right? But what you should be expecting to do is treat somebody with human decency and respect and with love. Like, I'm an educator. I work with children and people all the time. The main thing that I give is respect and love and gracious, right? So I don't see why that would be any different, but a lot of time women have in their mind, well, they're my kids, you should love them like I do. Well, no, they're not my kids. Just like you're not gonna love my kids like they're yours. So but sometimes I think that's wishful thinking. But anywho, let's get into it. Step parents once were viewed as replacing biological parent, thus recreating a two-parent family. And that's the difference, right? That was once the case, right? Because in particular, when it's a situation where the father just was never around, right? So they only know that man to be a father. So a lot of time that's why he got the title of dad. And more so the respect and the admiration. But you just not seeing that like that nowadays. And a lot is because fathers are present and the numbers back that up. All right, let's keep reading. Um, Economically, there may be some truth to this, but psychologically, that is not the reality. Remarriage and step parenting are new, tricky transitions for children, the step parent and biological parents for everybody, right? Fortunately, research and clinicians today better understand the common pitfalls of such blended families and how they can overcome them. That's important because 1 in 3 of us is a member of a step family, according to the Step Family Association of America, and that number is likely to grow as traditional family bonds grow more fragile. And we're already there. It's already is fragile, right? The demographics of step families are as complex as the psychological ones. About a quarter are headed by unmarried parents. For example, and step families make up the full spectrum of our nation's citizens, according to the association. And the thing about it is the numbers may even be higher than that because a lot of people in step parent situations that's just not married, as the last study was saying, that a lot of people are cohabitating. So uh, given the complexity of the subject matter, researchers and clinicians are looking at step families through many lenses. A major one is via the children, who often suffer the most through divorce, remarriage, and step family situations. They are particularly at risk if their biological parents are in conflict. The divorce situation is protracted. They receive less parents after divorce, or they lose important relationship as a result of the divorce, according to a 2003 article. And yes, when it comes to divorce, I mean it tears things up. The biggest thing is the pattern and the habits that have been established, right? So now you're gonna be switching different households. I mean, you're gonna have custody arrangements. You're gonna have people that's picking kids up at this time, but the other parent gonna pick them up at that time. Like it totally disrupt the way of life. So you can see why a kid would be very angry with a situation like that. Because as human beings, we thrive off consistency, predictability. We need it, we love it, we appreciate it. Okay. Indeed, children of divorce and later remarriage are twice as likely to academic, behaviorally, and socially struggle as children of first married parents. About 20 to 25% struggle compared with 10%, a range of research find. They're also more likely to get divorced themselves. Adults whose parents divorced but didn't remarry are 45% more likely to divorce than adults whose parents never divorced. He notes, and 91% more likely to divorce their parent divorced and remarried. Furthermore, children often call the shots of the emotion trajectory of family life, and that's due to the guilt, right? Let's see how much of this. Um, yeah, that's all I want to read to you. I think it pointed out some good points on, the success of step families, step parenting. It does depend on a lot of different factors. Um, it depends on, well, one is the communication between the two people, right? Um, these things have to be talked about, planned up front. You can't wing it and go into a situation and thinking that things gonna work out, right? You literally are gonna have. That's why it's important up front to get to know somebody and then bring the kids into the fold as quickly as possible so that kid can get used to having someone that's not their parent be around, right? Since it happened at such a high clip, that means that the regularity is happening more often with, you know, your kids' peers and things like that. So it's eventually this is going to be normalized, even though I I hate the fact that it will be, and I feel like it's already normalized, right? Just like a lot of things that are not good for our society is normalized, right? Whether that's drug use, murder, cheating, what have you, right? But this is the norm now. Step parenting, step families, blended families. This is the norm. So now we just got to figure out, okay, since people are just going to be leaving people and creating new families, then how do we make that work, right? But what the numbers are telling us that is not working like we want it to, and we think it should be working. Okay. But it just some that is gonna take some tinkering. Some people succeed, some people don't. That's just what it's gonna be, right? So um let's move on to our third piece of evidence, and we're gonna wrap this on up. I think this third piece of evidence is gonna kind of put things into even more perspective when it comes to step parenting. So let's get it.
And like on your end to be a stepfather, to kind of take on this father figure for two kids that aren't your kids.
Yeah, it's kind of hard because you're still not really their dad, right? And that's like, as a dad, like, you want to be the dad, right? But you have
Do you
to
ever feel the sense of like, I don't want to step on his toes and like piss people off and create?
Yeah, there's definitely some things that you do that you you kind of walk a fine line on that, like whether you're doing that. But I think a lot of it is, it's less that, it's just there's the kid's emotional side of it. And it's the, you're not their dad. They know you're not their dad. They still have their dad and they go see their dad. They love you, but I think for them to get comfortable in that scenario takes some time. Like, and it depends, I guess. I think every dynamic's a little bit different, but like, originally, we got into some things where it's like, the other step parent did not want them calling me dad, so, or the other parent didn't want them calling me dad.
Sure.
And I can't really begrudge that, like I think about it like on the other turn, like, what I want, someone being called dad, from my kids.
Yeah.
And so I can't really like, begrudge that. But I do think that, being directly told that to the kids was probably a situation that made them feel like they took a step back a little bit. And so it's just hard because they love you and you're always around, but there's also this sort of like, separation that's a little bit challenging. Like it's a little bit of a disconnect, especially when, you don't, for 10 years they were raised by somebody else, and, parenting styles are different. Home dynamics are different. Like we talked about, like, that's what I was going to bring up is like, we grew up as three boys who roughhoused and we played loud and we did crazy things and all this kind of stuff.
I cannot believe I'm still alive.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like some of the things we did were like, we should be dead. But, so like, but that stuff's what kind of comes natural to me, like the loud play, the kind of the rough housing a little bit.
Yeah, no one can stir up the kids in my house quite like you.
Right. It's
jeez.
It's a gift that I was given and trained well.
You have been an instigator
life forever.
I am. It's in my DNA apparently. But and my kids get it. They expect it. They kind of play with it. They go along with it. They think it's fun.
Yeah, they're used to that.
But that was a complete dynamic shift for my stepkids. It's like, they're like, why is he always torturing us?
What do you mean he's going to throw me against the couch?
Right. Yeah. They learn to like it eventually, but not all the time, but they're a little more, like, my wife is a little bit more quiet and calm. And like, her idea of a great time is sitting down with a good book, right? Which would bore me to tears. So like when we do Nerf wars and it gets loud, like she and our youngest daughter are kind of like, this is a little too much. And
I need my safe space.
Right. Yeah. So, they go off and do their own thing. And so that is a challenge. And I don't have any good answers for that.
Yeah.
Other than, you try to just work in a balance and be fair and say, okay, we've done our crazy wild Nerf war time. Let's do something that involves other people now and try to make it so that everybody gets to interact with everybody.
All right, that was my piece of evidence number 3. I found that clip and I just thought it was an interesting conversation because it was such an honest conversation about how, I don't want to say different being a step parent is, and the different things that you have to think about that you probably wouldn't have to think about if you was in a situation where you was married to a woman that you had a kid with, right? So when you're trying to put together a family dynamic that is foreign to not only you but the kids, like, it's just little stuff that you have to think about, right? And I thought he was being very open and honest about that, particularly when it comes to, like, if you had a kid that didn't want to do something, well, they don't have a choice, right? You're going to do what we're going to do because we're a family, right? Now, you can try that approach in a step family situation, but more than likely, the stepmom or the stepdad is not going to try to force something on that kid because they're trying to win that kid's favor, right? They're trying to get good in the good graces of that kid, right? So they will allow that kid to kind of step off and do their own thing, right? But that can lead to further alienation. So it's those type of things that you really got to think about when you in a blended family situation that can be difficult. Trust me, I know from experience. So um and it's just something that you really have to think long and hard of if you really want that in your life, right? Whether male or female. So, but as I stated, that is a little bit more different from the male because he take on more responsibility, right? So a lot of times what you would see is that step parent, they're going to, it's almost like when you're in a situation when you're not in the household with your kid, and then say if you the person that doesn't have your child like full custody or a good bit of the time, right? You become the fun parent, right? And it's the same way when it comes to step parenting because it's like you're always the fun parent because you want to show them a side and you want to make sure that you don't make them upset so you don't hear the phrase, "You're not my daddy," right? But that's what make it difficult when it comes to accountability, discipline, and things of that nature. So I would say that if you're going to do it, which a lot of people are, you really got to have that communication in place. You got to have that discipline, that structure. It's a lot of different factors that you really got to think about, man. But we're here now when it comes to blended families. So now we just got to find a way to make it work since we can't find a way to make our own families work. I was about to say our original families, but I don't know. It still perplexes me that it's almost like we're creating another issue because we created an issue. It boggles my mind, but hey, it is what it is at this point. So there you have it, man. I hope you get something from this episode. I do know that at least half the people that's going to watch this are step parents, right? Or even experience a step parent situation themselves, right? So that means you know exactly what I'm talking about. And it's something that a lot of things that go unsaid, a lot of things that we don't discuss, and we should. Whether that's a step parent situation or you in your biological parent situation, like more and more communication. There's no such thing as too much communication, right? Over communicate is better than not communicating at all of under communicating. So. All right, so we're gonna end the episode off right there, man. Once again, as always, I appreciate you rocking with me. Um, that wraps up episode 67, which is crazy to think we've already done 67 episodes. It boggles my mind, but appreciate you. You already know the links will be in the description if you want to help support the channel. If you need any, consulting going on, you already know the links will be in the description as well. So as always, I'm you are me. Love always, love eternal. Remember, the worst thing you could do is lie to yourself. All right. Hey, I think we made that case, baby. All right. Hey, deuces. One love.